Hello, Blue Jays fans, and welcome to episode 333 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by, of course, jaysfromthecouch.com. We've got another great episode for you this week. We're going to look at whether or not the Blue Jays are actually disappointing or just kind of getting the ball rolling, as it were. Thank you for tuning in, whether it's on Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you find the audio podcast. We really do appreciate the downloads and all of that stuff. Thank you so much. And of course, our live episode coming on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, where you can join the show and send in your comments and all of that stuff. We're happy to have you participating in the show and of course listening after the fact. I'm your host, as always, Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at DoyleJFTC. Like I said, we've got a great episode for you. Karen and Steve are going to jump in here in a minute. We're going to take a look at some disappointments, perhaps, and as well as some reasons for optimism, because if you look up and down the roster, there's plenty of examples of both, and we're about approaching the midway of the season, so it might be a good time to take stock there. But before we do that, I want to take a minute to remind you that you too can join the conversation with Jays from the Couch in our Facebook group, the Blue Jays Talk for All Facebook group. We're growing every day. Lots of great stuff going on there. Some funny stuff, some interesting stuff, some stuff to make you think, some questions and all of that stuff. And it's just good old-fashioned Blue Jays Talk for All. So look us up on Facebook and join the conversation. As well, I'm going to continue to plug this weekly. Jays from the Couch is a proud supporter of the ALS Society of Canada. About a few years ago, it struck my family. So on a personal level, this means a lot to me. We've decided that we're going to use Jays from the Couch to try and help end this disease so no other families have to continue to suffer through the devastation of ALS. So you can make a charitable tax-deductible donation to the ALS Society of Canada at support.alsevents.ca/Jays from the Couch. Any amount is deeply appreciated. We've set a goal of $5,000 and we're slowly making our way there, but we're going to continue. Even if we reach the 5,000, we're going to keep going because ALS keeps going. So are we. As well, if you want to get a little something extra for your money, you can head to our Redbubble shop where you can get Jays from the Couch merchandise. We've got Jays from the Couch, the podcast. We've got Sunny Side of the Dome and the OnFact Circle, all kinds of merchandise for you there. And 100% of the profits go directly to the ALS Society of Canada so that they continue fighting the good fight. So please continue to support us so we can support them. Thank you so much for that. And, of course, now we're going to get the ball rolling. And joining me this week is host of the OnFact Circle Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the Feckless Wonder himself. Good evening, Steve.
Good evening, Sean. Notice I've got my Expos gear on. I mean, with Canada Day coming up, I thought it was really important to do that. And, for Blue Jay fans to remember that the Expos have made the same number of in-season moves to improve their roster in 2023 as the Blue Jays have.
There you go. And the Expos roster right now is not looking too good either. So, I mean, the Nationals aren't they're it's not their year. Let's just say that. Anyway, as well, joining us, host of Sunny Side of the Dome, Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Karen Suter. Good evening, Karen.
Good evening, Sean. Good evening, Steve. And I have two words for you. Tyler Heineman. It was a sneaky good pickup. I know he's a third-string catcher, but he's been very useful. So,
well, he doesn't count because he just keeps going back and forth. There's some kind of unwritten thing with MLB and MLB sign off. Okay, for 2 months you have Tyler Heineman, then you have to give us back. I'm going to give him back to you for 2 months. You have to exclude him. And I did say to improve their 2023 roster. I didn't say that they're just making a transaction.
Wasn't there a pitcher a couple years ago that kept going back and forth? I can't think of who, a relief pitcher.
Oh, Joel Payamps, who was lights out, multiple saves, no blown saves, a bunch of holds for the Brewers. Yeah. And he stayed in one place and done all that. So
I wonder if that has anything to do with it. I might just be talking crazy here. Anyway, so this week's episode is a little interesting because actually over the weekend I had this conversation with a bunch of guys sitting around and we're talking about the Blue Jays, and I had to be honest, and then I'm pretty disappointed so far. This season has not gone how I expected it to, how many people expected it to, how Ross Atkins expected it to, whilst patting himself on the back. I don't think that right now, 10 games out of first place in the AL East is where they saw themselves at the end of June. Now they did, thanks to playing the team formerly known as the Oakland Athletics, they managed to end up with that third wild card spot, and that's where we are today. So that's kind of where we're going to start this conversation. And Steve, I'm going to start with you. The third wild card spot, just recently and just barely. Is that a disappointment to date?
Oh, it's obviously a disappointment, but bottom line is, as of right now, they are in a playoff berth. So ultimately, you have to get all the snideness and all the fecklessness put aside and all that other stuff. And you need to factor in the fact that if the playoffs were going to happen today, the Blue Jays would be in that third wild card spot position to get swept again in the first round.
Right. And that's what I was going. I thought you were pulling a Karen here, and you were going to have logic and positivity take over your body or something. And then I was going to totally give it to you, right? Because that's not Steve at all, right? Here we are, and I'll do it. I don't care. We've got the Toronto Blue Jays, who were supposed to be division winners. That's fine. They still may end up being division winners. It's only 10 games, and there's 3 months left in the season. It is definitely possible. Mathematically, it's possible. So I'm not going to, go over the top with this. But the third wild card spot is not where they should be at this point in this season. And if the playoffs started today, yes, the Blue Jays have actually kind of handled the Rays well this season, but they're at a disadvantage there. So my thoughts personally is that you're absolutely right, that they are in a position to get bounced again in short order in the postseason. And regardless of whether or not they can beat the Rays, it doesn't really matter, because you're putting yourself in a position where you don't have much time to do so. Right. And you're at a better advantage winning the division. So that's where I am right now. It's like, first of all, you're kind of just hanging on by your nails, and it's a terrible, terrible spot to be in. Not a spot you were supposed to be in. So Karen, tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, first off, I'm not quite following your thought process. You've got them, I guess, winning the first round and moving on to face the Rays in the second round.
Yes. No. Sorry, my bad. You're right. I forgot about that bye. You're right. I apologize for that.
So they'd be swept by the Twins.
They'll be swept.
Well, let's hope not.
The 500 Minnesota Twins. Yep.
Let's try.
All right, Karen. I apologize for that.
Because among other things, the Blue Jays do have the better record than the division-leading Minnesota Twins, and don't get me started about that. But well, Steve.
You play in the division you play in. You play the schedule that you play in. So just like everybody was up in arms, the Rays, they're not playing anybody good. Eventually, they're going to play everybody, just like the Blue Jays are. So you can't just do that. You knew going into the season, Ross Atkins, Mark Shapiro, that you were in the AL East. Okay, you weren't in the Canadian division of Major League Baseball. You were in the American League East. You knew you had to go even further, more of an extra mile, an extra kilometer, if you will, to compete and win this division. So to come back and say, now they have to go on the road and play the winner of a weaker division or a lower record team, take care of the business you needed to take care of first, and you're not doing it.
No, fair enough, but Karen's point still stands. The division comparison is not like they're not the same. They're not the same.
They're not. But
regardless,
getting back to what's going on with the Jays, and are they a disappointment? I mean, I think the jury is out. If I were a teacher, I would say incomplete report card at this point. Has it been frustrating? I mean, they've had their ups and downs. I see a team that's when they play, and I've said it several times, when they play their best baseball, there isn't a team in Major League Baseball that they aren't capable of beating. The problem is their inconsistency. They come out one day and they're great, and then another day you don't have a clue what's going on with them. And I really wish I understood it, but I mean, they struggled for a while. Everyone knows that. They played themselves out of a playoff spot, and they were out of a playoff spot for a while. So you don't go from out of a playoff spot one day to leading the division 1 or 2 days later. It's Rome wasn't built in a day, and they're climbing back into it. So by end of day Saturday, they were tied for the third wild card spot. Now they have the third wild card spot all to themselves, and they're half a game behind the Yankees for the second wild card spot, who might or might not get Aaron Judge back this season, who are batting under 200 as a team this month. Like, tell me this team can't be caught and passed, because they can. I think the Jays are moving up there. If at the end of the regular season all they could manage is the third wild card, then yeah, I'll be disappointed. But I am not ready to say that yet. I'm saying that this team has had its ups and downs, and there's a lot of different reasons for that. But you know what? If you go back year by year by year and look at every champion, they don't always lead from wire to wire. A lot of them have struggled early and have had to work and find themselves and whatever it is that they need to do to get better.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, and I think that's that's kind of what's keeping me from just throwing myself off the ledge here, is knowing that there's 3 months left. Like, when you just stop and think about it, yeah, 3 months left. There's lots of time, and so on and so on. But I think for me, what's so frustrating is that this team, and I think, Karen, you hit it on the head, that this team, when they're going right, can beat anybody. But the problem is that they can't get it all going right at the same time. And it's been like the expectations and really all everybody had to do was just play to their abilities. The problem is they haven't done that. Right. And that's what's frustrating. And that's why it's so frustrating, is because it's there. The talent's there. The ability is enough collectively as a group. They, on paper, and I know that it is just paper, but collectively they have the talent to beat anybody, but they haven't lived up to that talent. And that's, for me, why I'm so frustrated, is that when you mentioned being a teacher, and that's one of the frustrating things for teachers, is when you see a student sitting in front of you who is not living up to their potential, and that's when you want to shake them and just, what I mean? Because you see what's in there, and they're just not letting it out. And I think that's, for me, what's so frustrating about this Blue Jays team, Steve, is that it's there, and you can't even really blame. And I know you're gonna turn it into that you can, but I don't think you can blame the general manager necessarily for a group of 26 players who are not necessarily consistently living up to the potential that got them in the spot that they're in right now.
Sometimes talent alone doesn't get it done.
Right.
The more I watch this Blue Jays team this year, and then especially over the last 2 years, I keep having flashbacks to teams like the Mets in the 80s. There was no more talented pitching staff. There was no more talented lineup than the New York Mets from 84 to 88, 89. They made the playoffs twice. They won one World Series, but with that roster, they should have won way more than they did, and then you look in that same era and you take a team, let's say like the Cardinals, who were not necessarily big. They always had one number. They played a different brand of baseball, but they were able to buy into a system that was successful for them. I think that's why the Astros won last year, because they bought into what Dusty Baker kept trying to tell them. And a lot of their bigger stars, like Correa, were gone. Springer was gone. Play within yourself. Play the game you know how to play. Follow the instruction, and you will win, and you'll get to the World Series. And I just wonder if this group, as talented and as fun as they are chemistry is such a weird thing in sports in general, but certainly in baseball. Sometimes you just don't have, that. Look at the Padres. Yeah. On paper, it's like, oh my God, they're the best everywhere. No, I mean, I think it's more obvious what the Padres, why there's no chemistry there. But, sometimes you just don't have it. Mm-hmm. In Blue Jays history, you had all the great players in '85 that won the AL East. Change in manager, change in circumstances. They just didn't capitalize again for another 4 or 5 seasons until they made a major change. And so I don't know if that makes Blue Jay fans feel better, but I mean, ultimately, I think that explains it. Maybe sometimes players don't play well together. And that's right. The mystery here.
Well, and two, I think that for the longest time, this team is made up of a bunch of guys who are super talented, Karen, and kind of that talent alone was able to take them right up to the top relatively quickly. But what I do like is that listening to Steve here is we have a young, talented team who are trying to figure out and learn how to win, and maybe it's a good thing that the first half of the season is an up and down, and individual guys are learning how to kind of go through those peaks and valleys and to kind of even them out, so to speak, right? So maybe that, Karen, is something that we can kind of say that may be a positive.
Yeah, let's hope they figure out something to minimize the downside and go on a nice winning streak or like a 10-2 stretch or something like that. Apparently, one interesting fact that I had no clue about, but someone I follow on Twitter today posted that from May 26th until the present, the Blue Jays actually have the best win-loss record over that stretch in the entire American League. Like, okay, that's interesting. I don't know. Sometimes, not even for me necessarily, but for a lot of rather negative people on social media, they lose a game and people start acting like they've just lost 5 or something. So
right.
I mean, hopefully they can put it together, and I think there's things that they can do. I think, I mean, again, you never wish injury on anybody, but Adam Cimber just doesn't have it this year. So him being back on the injured list in terms of the Blue Jays' chances of winning games is not necessarily a bad thing, because almost anybody with major league caliber would be better than Adam Cimber right now.
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
This just hit me as we were talking here. Do you think that there is a lingering effect from the playoff exit last year? Did it do something to the players where maybe they're pressing more now and they're having, again, it's all, it's all subtle stuff. It's not obvious stuff they're talking about in the clubhouse. But do you think in certain situations, players are pressing too much to make up for what happened in the playoff series against the Mariners?
Karen, do you want to answer first, or?
I don't know. That's a tough question. I guess it's possible. I mean, remember too that a significant number of the players that are here this year weren't there last year. So in theory, that shouldn't really be affecting them. Is that affecting some of the others? perhaps, I don't know. I mean, if we can, one thing that I thought of, and for just one moment here, if we can separate the personality things from the on-field thing. But Anthony Bass, last year, he came into game 2 and he literally did not get anybody out. And he said at some point after that, that's once the season ended, he didn't want to reflect at all. Like, he just mentally walked away from baseball for a period of time. I mean, I'm sure nobody wants to be in that situation. You come in to do a job and you can't do any of it. And I wondered early on this season, the way he struggled in April, if mentally that might have been a part of it. Are there other, I mean, but to me, in my way of looking at that, that was more of, yes, it's the big spotlight, it's the playoffs, but it was his individual performance. He didn't get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And last year, I mean, has something like that affected Alek Manoah at all? He didn't have the greatest game, and the game that he started is part of it. Shaking. I mean, the man always seemed to have, confidence oozing out of every pore in his body. Like, is this the first time he has really struggled at all professionally? I don't know. I mean, it might, on an individual level here and there might be players that it bothered.
Yeah. And that would have been my response too. Like, the one it should have bothered, the Bass hole is gone, right? So it doesn't really, to me, individually, I would say he's the one who should be, the most affected by it. But I think more than the wild card loss, I think that's kind of the catalyst. But the whole offseason where the moves were made and big deals were, Chris Bassett signed, Dalton Varsho comes in. Those are moves that led to the expectations that we're talking about here. And I think those expectations, we are going to win this season, whether, not necessarily we're going to win it all, not necessarily we're going to win the division, but we're going to win. I think that on a young team, it does cause guys to push. Even, somebody experienced like George Springer is kind of susceptible to that kind of thing, right? Where, like, you're expected to do well, you want to do well, and you try a little bit harder to do well. And baseball, more than any other sport, is the place where you can't do that. So I think that not just, Steve, the kind of the disappointment, but that, and then the off season, I think led to kind of this, and I think this is where, like, I when I said earlier, I said that they're kind of learning how to work through those things. The learning how to win thing, it only comes in situations like this. If your talent continues to take you to the top, you don't really necessarily learn the ins and outs of winning, as opposed to just coasting your way through, right? And I think that's kind of what it's a kind of a perfect storm of all of these things for the Blue Jays right now.
But isn't that what 2020 and 2021 are about? Learning how to win, getting success, building upon that. That's when you were learning how to win. 2022, they should have gone farther. But they made the playoffs. Okay, that's good. So I don't know at this stage and I understand where you're coming from, and it's just as valid an argument as anything that I've put forward. But my expectations were high because the Blue Jays were making the progression, and even with the disappointment of last year, they were making progression. They made big additions, so it becomes put up or shut up time. Yeah, basically, you either start winning and you start playing like a championship team, or we break you up.
Yeah, I don't know that you're going to see a breakup, but I think you might see a breakup in the front office because at this point, there's nothing left, right? And Ross Atkins has painted himself into that corner. After firing Charlie Montoyo, he basically said, "There's nobody left, boys. This is me," right? So we'll see. But speaking of individual performances, we're going to leave Ross Atkins alone here for a little bit, or try to anyway. He's making it very difficult. But anyway, let's look at some individuals, and we'll spend just a couple of minutes on each one. We've each selected an individual who's been a relative we don't want to call them odd disappointments because I'm sure they're lovely people, but their performances have left something to be desired. So, Karen, we'll start with you with your disappointment.
Right. So last year, a year ago, year and a half ago, whatever it was, in the off season, the Blue Jays signed free agent pitcher Jimmy Garcia. And it was a little bit under the radar. I mean, they did some other things last offseason. I think the big splash was Kevin Gausman. And then after the lockout, they traded for Matt Chapman, and everybody was abuzz about all of those acquisitions. And Garcia quietly, I think, last year really had a nice season for himself. I mean, he was a veteran, is a veteran major league pitcher, has had some success, although you look at his seasons and he's been a little bit up and down and inconsistent. But last year, he pitched to a 3.10 ERA, and he was someone that most of the time, when you brought him in, you could count on him to get the job done. In fact, going to that wild card game, he also pitched. He pitched, I believe, the 7th inning, and he was lights out, and he didn't even throw that many pitches. And as I often do, I think, why couldn't Garcia have come back for the 8th? I mean, in any case. But yeah, so that last season, he had a decent season, 3.10 ERA. And I was hopeful for more of the same from him this season. Unfortunately, as we all know, it's been anything but. And I'm a little bit at a loss to understand it. So his ERA is 5.34. The walks per 9 innings, almost identical to last year, 2.4 per 9 innings last year, 2.5 this year. So both quite good. His pitch command is fine. For all of you who think that strikeouts are the be-all and end-all, especially for a relief pitcher, well, this year he has 10.7 strikeouts per 9. Last year he only had 8.6. So that's not all there is to being successful. And even his velocity, if you look on Fangraphs and you can see the average velocity for each type of pitch that he throws, across the board, it's slightly up this year. So I don't know what the heck is going on with him, whether it's location, whether it's his mix of pitches. I'm at a loss, as I think he is, as I think the coaching staff is, but the Blue Jays, I'm sure, wanted to count on him for some help out of the bullpen this season, and he just hasn't provided it, and it's too bad because they need guys down there that they can count on.
Yeah, and kind of further to his woes, I guess. I think the big thing for him it's the home run ball, right? The home runs per 9 at 1.4. The excuse me. Home run to fly ball rate, so the number of home runs that come from balls in the air, it's jumped to 21.7%, whereas last year it was at 7.7%. So, when balls are getting hit in the air, they're going out, and that's one of the biggest problems that he's having as well. His batting average on balls in play is almost 400, right? So you're talking about when the ball gets hit, it's going out, or you know what I mean. Like he's not really fooling anybody, I guess, is the issue here. So that for me is a big concern, Steve.
Yeah, and it's ironic because you think about it, he was the closer for Don Mattingly. When Mattingly was in Miami, he was a closer under. I mean, it didn't last very long, But so you'd think that Mattingly would know his tendencies to whether it be losing focus. I mean, personally, I think it's pitch location, going back and watching it. I think it's pitch location. But you would think that Mattingly would have that extra insight because Garcia pitched for him, in leverage situations. But, I mean, it's a disappointment. I don't know that it's a surprise to me because, as you alluded to, Karen, he has been very up, down, up, down, up, down. So, but and strikeouts are not be all end all. Though I should mention that Julian Merriweather is striking out 14.2 batters per 9 innings. for the Cubs in leverage situations.
I believe his earned run average is also very good.
Yeah, it might have bumped up over 1, but it was under 1, I think, up until his last appearance. So I think that maybe Rogers Center is built over an Indian burial ground or something that we don't know about, and so everything coming in is just going wrong. You get Julian Merriweather out of here, and suddenly he's Bruce Sutter and Lee Smith for the Cubs. And I don't get it. I watch him pitch. He looks just as gangly and still out of control, but somehow it's working. So relief pitching is such a crapshoot. It's almost like going to the casino. One time you're playing this one machine and you stay there and you hit the jackpot 2 or 3 times, and then the next time you go back to the casino,
wearing
suddenly,
a diaper.
Right. Suddenly they have the mortgage to your house and the title to your car. It's just one of those things, and that's why I'm a big advocate of trading for relievers in season, not necessarily signing them in the off season, because you really you don't know. Even Jordan Romano has some fluctuation from year to year to year. I mean, it's not as dramatic because he is so dominant, but there is that fluctuation.
Right. Yeah, relievers are the most volatile for sure. That's why Alex Anthopoulos kind of shied away from those longer contracts for them. For that reason, he said that, right? But JP Ricciardi had no problem with it, of course, but we're not going to go there. Yeah, but Steve, let's talk about your disappointment for the 2023 season so far.
Yeah, I say this with a heavy heart. I mean, Dalton Varsho is the guy that I'm most disappointed in. Okay, hold up the sign, Karen. Actually, let's take a moment now for Karen to say what she's dying to say. Come on, Karen. Say it. Say it.
When the trade announced, I wasn't as enthused as so many people were. I looked at his stats and I didn't see it. And I don't want to be right that he's underperforming, but so far he's underperforming.
As usual, Karen is being polite. She wanted to say, "I told you so" in the worst way. But he's not performing as we expected, based on the progression that he had shown in his career. He is not performing offensively the way that we want. I mean, I think he's hitting, if there's a negative batting average, I think that's what he's hitting at Rogers Center. And I don't understand it, because I would think that would be the perfect environment. He hit in a similar environment playing in Arizona, so I don't quite understand it. But you look at the numbers, and we're almost about halfway through. So he had 27 homers last year. He has 12 this year. So if you double it and then factor in, he's pretty close to last year. His runs batted in, he's not even sniffing it, because he had 74 last year, and he's only got 28 this year. Stolen bases, he's on pace. He stole 16 in 22 attempts. He's 10 out of 12 attempts this year. And defensively, he's a marvel for a catcher. And again, he was in college. He won the national award for best catcher in the country. For him to convert to the outfield as smoothly as he did last year, and certainly he's been spectacular this year. I mean, I should maybe almost say I have things of optimism for him, but I have to be realistic. He has underperformed what I and many people expected from Varsho. And the fact that the players that were moved to obtain Varsho for this season certainly are having, a marvelous. I don't think anybody expected Gabriel Moreno to be that good throwing out base runners. I mean, you knew he was going to hit. You knew he was athletic. But what he's doing throwing out base runners in Arizona is unbelievable. And of course, Lourdes Gurriel is probably going to make an all-star team. So when you put it, and we always talk about this, we got to put it into what's happening now. I don't want to know what should have happened or could happen, what the potential is. Right now, the trade is now looking bad for the 2023 season because the two assets traded away are going to far outperform Dalton Varsho, even if he goes on a historic streak. The two combined WAR is going to be there. But I mean, again, even from a WAR standpoint, because of his defense, he averages about a 2.2 WAR per year for his career, and that's what his WAR is as of yesterday's games. His WAR is 2.2. So so he's on target of what he has been. He just has not taken that big step that I believed, and I think many believed that he was ready to take.
I'm going to ask if that's Baseball Reference WAR, Steve, because I'm looking at Fangraph.
There's only one WAR, and it's Baseball Reference WAR. Fangraph and Fake start with the same letter, F. And so do other things that start with F, and that's what I believe as far as Fangraph statistics and things like that. But yeah, I see the shirt. You must wear a pentagram. I mean, basically, you're bringing in bad voodoo, okay, by wearing a Fangraph shirt, on a baseball podcast. I mean, you're just asking for trouble with that.
I guess. Just to kind of emphasize your point there, his batting average at home is not negative, but it might as well be. It's a Ryan Goins-esque 154.
It's up 32 points in the last 2 weeks.
In 131 plate appearances, he has 18 total hits, 13 of which are singles. The good news is he's not striking out as much at home as he is away. I don't know. I think to me, Dalton Varsho kind of encapsulates the thing I was talking about earlier, the kind of trying a little bit too hard to live up to the expectations, and new city, new environment. Let's be honest, when he was traded, nobody thought the Diamondbacks were going to be what they have been for the first part of the season. So I think, in all honesty, I think Varsho is the guy who's probably pressing the most.
Right.
Or has been anyway.
And in fairness, he's sort of working at a disadvantage because if Vladdy struggles, he could call his dad a Hall of Famer. Bo struggles, he's got his dad Dante, who's worked miracles with a lot of Blue Jays hitters. Dalton's got Gary Varsho, who I loved as a player, but he's Gary. It's like playing me every day in the lineup if you're talking about Gary Varsho. And I'm 62. I'm not quite dead, but I'm awfully close. So you don't want to come to me for advice. And so I think Dalton is trying to pressure. Cavan's got his Hall of Fame father, Craig, and Dalton's got Gary. That's kind of a decided disadvantage.
Right. Karen, Dalton Varsho, do you want to weigh in on the disappointment that has been Dalton Varsho?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be fair and I want to be kind as much as I can. There's good and bad, and unfortunately, his performance to date is somewhere in the ballpark of what I feared it might be when I saw that trade. So I'm like many people, I'm really not all that surprised. But I mean, there's good and bad. I mean, the one positive that absolutely blows me away about him is the way he hustles. Like I watch him play. It's like, oh my God, look at this guy. He just doesn't stop. He gives maximum effort, and I really hope he doesn't get big time hurt at some point because of it. But I mean, you can't fault the way he plays and how hard he tries. His defense has been good. I mean, from the standpoint of someone who had really never seen him play before this year, all I saw were the stats, and I thought, wow, they got a really good defender. But before they traded for him, they signed Kevin Kiermaier. So part of my confusion and less than happiness with the trade was this feels very redundant. They've got an excellent defender, and they brought in another excellent defender. I mean, you can a ball can only be caught once. So I didn't know that it was really necessary. And at that point, with having Kevin Kiermaier and moving Springer over to right field, I was really hoping for an offensive performer. I mean, the defense has been good. There are times here and there, and maybe it's not fair because we're watching a top-notch defender in center field. I've heard lately people saying, is Kevin Kiermaier one of the best defenders ever to play this game? So almost anyone compared to him might not measure up as well. And true, like you said, Steve, I mean, he's a natural catcher. How much time has he spent in the outfield, Varsho? So, it's fair to say that he's probably still learning here and there when he might break the wrong way on a play or something like that. Maybe maybe that's something that'll improve. The hitting, I mean, I was hoping for a strong performer from the left-hand side, and like anything 800 OPS or better, and I'm turning cartwheels. He can't consistently keep his OPS over 700. Never mind 800. I mean, you look at the rankings of the Blue Jay regular position players, and he's way down there. I was looking at, for example, just for interest's sake, and these stats are at least a few days old, so they might have changed a bit. But in this past offseason, of course, everybody knew that the Blue Jays wanted to get a little bit more left-handed, and I was really hoping for an impact hitter from the left side of the plate, particularly after they parted ways with a significant part of their offense in Teoscar Hernandez and then Lourdes Gurriel Jr. So who were some of the players that were available as free agents? Part of what started me thinking about this was hearing recently people saying, well, in the offseason, you can't imagine that Ross Atkins sat down and made Brandon Belt his number one free agent target or anything. So sorry there, Steve. So some notable free agents that the Blue Jays might or might not have tried to sign. So Brandon Nimmo, Cody Bellinger, who I know you really wanted, Steve, Michael Brantley, Michael Conforto, Joey Gallo, and then Brandon Belt, all of whom I believe are left-handed hitters. So how have these guys fared this year? Well, Michael Brantley has literally done nothing. He hasn't even played. But of all the others, the one I was most interested in has done the best, and that's Brandon Nimmo. Now, I know you have to be fair. He comes with a huge price tag, so it took mega bucks for the Mets to re-sign him. And I mean, so far he is performing for them. So Cody Bellinger, nice bounce back season at a 773 OPS. Michael Conforto, not bad for having all of last year off at 751. Joey Gallo, 749. I mean, someone else whose career has been inconsistent. Brandon Belt, next to Brandon Nimmo, has had the best season with the second best season with the bat so far at an OPS of 797. That's not bad. I mean, he literally all he does is hit. So they brought him in to hit. If he doesn't hit, then it was a waste of a signing. And then you compare, because I looked at all of that, and then I thought, okay, what about Varsho by comparison? And he's got a long way to go before he is going to be the good, well-rounded two-way player that a lot of people think he's going to be. I still hope he gets there. I mean, there's time. He's not that old, and as I for a lot of reasons, there could be a learning curve happening here, and I really hope that's what it is. And maybe he's need a different hitting coach.
Yeah, I mean, there's an answer in there somewhere, right? And maybe it's just more time is all he needs. I mean, he is suffering from some bad luck. His batting average on balls and plays is only 245. So that's you've got on the one end a 400 batting average on balls and plays, and well, here it's a 254, right? And that there is some bad luck there as well. Go ahead, Steve.
And here's the baffling thing. I'm looking at his splits. on Baseball Reference, not Fangraphs, which means they're actual game results, not expected weighted crap. Oh, on the road, he's hitting 272, 324 on base, which could be better. He's slugging 494, and his OPS is 818. At the Rogers Center, he's batting 154, 244 on base percentage, which is pitiful. He's slugging 248, so he's just barely slugging above what his on base percentage, as you alluded to. Almost everything's a single, and his OPS is 492. Mm-hmm. So that tells you, okay, there's something where he's pressing, or there's something about it home. But if I gave you that line and you didn't know it was Dalton Varsho and said, this is what this guy's doing on the road, you'd be saying, oh, I want him now. I want him now on my team. This may be the most puzzling thing I have ever been a part of as far as rooting for a team and a team performance is Dalton Varsho at home. I just don't. You can't put anything to it. Okay, it's, there's no big giant wall. They're not. It's not like the Windy City and it's the wind's blowing in all the time. It makes no sense to have that kind of difference between your home and away splits.
Yeah, the only thing more confusing is 2022 Jose Barrios, I think. But I'm gonna give you my disappointment, and then we're gonna kind of, because we're running out of time here, and then we'll get to our people we're optimistic about. My disappointment is, and I feel terrible saying it because he's an all-star last year, but it's Alejandro Kirk. With the Toronto Blue Jays, in my mind, have gone from having two everyday catchers to what every other team now has as a catcher, an everyday catcher and a backup. Alejandro Kirk has kind of played himself into that backup role, and simply, I'm not going to go on about his defense. I know, Steve, you take not issue, but you're not overly impressed with his ability to call games and things like that. I'm actually more focused on what he's kind of more known for, and that is his bat. He's just kind of a 91 weighted runs created plus. If we're going to, put it in OPS terms, that's a 668. He's got his power, his ISO number is .079. So the power has all but disappeared from his game. He's only at 3 home runs, and not that he's a big home run hitter at all by any stretch, but 3 is not good enough for Alejandro Kirk. Striking out a bit more, walking a bit less, but that power is just completely gone. And where in the past we've been looking at a guy who can get on base and just put the ball in play and all of that stuff. This is a kind of jarring for me to witness. One of the better bat to ball guys that I think I can remember seeing with my eyes, of course, Bo Bichette being another one. So, Karen, to me, this is kind of a letdown so far for Alejandro Kirk.
Yeah, I mean, there's no two ways about it when you look at those stats, and I really expected to see the Alejandro Kirk that's we as Blue Jays fans have kind of gotten used to, and for a while he got up to a very slow start, and then he kind of seemed to be busting out of it, but then he's sort of taken a step back again before the injury. So yeah, and I mean there's so much that there's so many different aspects to the defensive side of being a catcher, and definitely game calling is a part of it. It's not that's more of a cerebral thing. It's not like throwing runners out or blocking pitches or framing pitches or whatever, where the stats say that as far as pitch framing and those sorts of things, the physical aspects, that Kirk's defense is actually pretty decent. It's not that bad, but I get what you're saying about game calling. I don't disagree with it, and yeah, I mean, I hope that he can still bounce back. I don't really know what's going on, but yeah, hopefully he can adjust. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, a guy like who can hit the way he hits, I don't necessarily worry about it, over the long haul. But it does. So far, it has been a bit of a letdown. Steve, Alejandro Kirk.
I really do think that the game calling and the things that are being expected of him, because he was really going to be the number one guy with Jansen backing him up. I really think that he's carrying that onto the field with him, and that happens. I mean, it's natural, to carry, either defensive woes to the bat or or the bat, onto the field. It does happen all the time, and I mean, Kirk. I mean, I still remember, last year sitting when Karen and her husband Ron and like hundreds of other Blue Jay fans invaded Pittsburgh, and and we were sitting in the game, but there were some Pirates fans like to the side of me and behind me, and we got to talking, and then every time Kirk came up, it was like he can do anything he wants. I mean, why they're like, why do you pitch to him? Because it doesn't matter. He can hit no matter what you want to do. It's like that thing. What was in the natural? When the sports writer's talking about the main character, Roy Hobbs, he goes, he does whatever he wants, double, triple, single, homer, whatever he wants to do. And that's sort of the kind of hitter that Alejandro Kirk is. And I do think it is, we talked about growing pains. I think this is a growing pain learning situation. And it's a situation where they can't send him down for a couple of weeks to work out some kinks. Really, as a catcher, you've got to do it on the job, every day. So I think Kirk will, over the course of his career, be the type of hitter we are. But I mean, this year it's just one of those years.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that maybe, maybe that's all it is, right? But he certainly kind of let me down over the first 3 months. Anyway, we've spent a long time talking about the disappointments, and we are almost out of time. So instead of kind of going for equal length on the reasons for optimism, maybe what we'll do is we'll each give our reasons for optimism, and then like each of us kind of like a quick one kind of liner in response to that. So Karen, we'll start with you with your reason for optimism, and it's a good one.
Yeah. Big Nate Pearson, finally, even though it's in a relief role, finally showing a lot of the potential that we all knew he had for years. And his numbers are a little inflated because he had back-to-back games there that he got roughed up a bit. But before that, his ERA was under 2 at 196. I think Nate Pearson is the real deal. I think they found a good role for him in the bullpen, and I hope he sticks around and helps the Jays win big.
Mm-hmm. Steve, Nate Pearson.
I'll tell you, it would be a great thing to see. I mean, if we were having this conversation last season, that would be it. I mean, Nate Pearson. I mean, we didn't talk about Alex Manoah because it was too obvious to talk about Alex Manoah being a disappointment, but my sense of optimism is not internal; it's external. There are teams. Karen alluded to Aaron Judge and his injured toe. He's not going to be back probably till August, September. There are teams now like the Reds, and the Diamondbacks that are competing. The Giants are back, enrolling. These are teams that are now competing that nobody thought would. So they're going to be also very active and probably proactive in the market. We've seen the Angels already go out and add 2 pieces to fill in for injuries that they had. So these teams that nobody expected, they're going to make it tougher for the Yankees, and the Dodgers, to pick up players. So I think that things are going to happen outside of the Blue Jays organization. They're going to open up doors, and it's going to be up. And I think the Blue Jays, then at that point, it's up to them to walk through those doors and take advantage of the opportunity. There's going to be at least one team that the Blue Jays are competing with for a playoff berth that's going to do something really stupid. And I'm looking at you, Brian Cashman, in order to try to correct something. And I think the Blue Jays can take advantage of it as long as Ross stays out of the way.
Right. I mean, on Nate Pearson, I'll just say, like, almost the results are secondary to his health, and finally he looks to be healthy and on the mound for a consistent amount of time, and that's huge. So with, and especially when we talked about Jimmy Garcia struggling, it's certainly nice to see Big Nate asserting himself once again. Steve, who is your reason for optimism?
Well, that was my reason for optimism. When you went to me and said, Steve, I thought you wanted me to actually talk about my thing of optimism. I'm so glad that, that I'm able to communicate in such an effective way, and that my 40 plus years of broadcasting experience has carried over here into the Jason the Couch podcast, because obviously I'm making such a connection with my colleagues here that I don't have to,
Well then, all right. Well, in that case, then yes, I think the optimism that the Blue Jays do have an opportunity with the Yankees going down, and finally, I think they'll end up to be where I thought they would be 3 months ago. So I'm going to present then my reason for optimism, and I have to be honest, it surprised me when I came up with it, but it's Yusei Kikuchi. And all I will say is this. How about this? Because we're running out of time, I will say, where would the Blue Jays be if Yusei Kikuchi wasn't pitching the way he has been this year? You don't even have to answer, but just think about that. So, and you know what? You can throw Jose Barrios in there if you want to, but Yusei Kikuchi has been the guy to kind of give me hope. Watching him for the first 3 months of this season, and we even started back in spring training, there's hope here. And if he can do that and just keep going, because at some point, like, I feel like he may even be pitching over his head right now. So if he can just maintain until everything else falls into place, I think he may be the single savior of this season. And how's that for drama?
Yeah. Repeatable delivery, 2 words for me. It's repeatable delivery, and he's doing it, and it's fantastic.
Go ahead, Karen.
You said just quickly, you said pitching over his head, and I just had a flashback of Hideo Nomo.
Oh, yes, that wind-up, man.
But his old delivery, he was up over his head, and he was way back here.
Right.
Now he's got an arm angle, and it's every single time. I mean, he occasionally, on most home runs he gives up, and he leads the majors in giving up home runs. It really is a fact that he's not, his release point is different, but that adjustment he's made where he's not way back here slinging, I think that's made all the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. We are just about out of time, but we are here every week bringing you our favorite segments every week, just for some shits and giggles, as they say. It's fake Blue Jays news, where we make up a bunch of stories loosely based on reality, I should say, to entertain you. So I've got a number of ones. Steve, we'll throw it over to you first for fake Blue Jays news.
Well, thank you, Sean. There's actually a new thing about the Titan submarine disaster that actually has a baseball tie-in to it. As we all know, 5 pieces of the Titan submarine have been found on the seafloor about 1,600 feet from the wreckage of the Titanic. And Rear Admiral John Mauger of the U.S. Coast Guard revealed that additional debris found nearby on the doomed submersible was a fan of the Toronto Blue Jays, apparently, because there was a Blue Jays cap, a jersey, and Topps card sets that belonged to one of the passengers aboard the ill-fated craft. Now, Admiral Mauger has theorized that the presence of the 2023 Blue Jays team set could explain the catastrophic implosion. Now, in a related story, the U.S. Navy has disclosed that the rescue mission will cost taxpayers about $1.5 million. And it's really a bargain, really, when you consider that Brandon Belt is costing the Blue Jays $9.3 million, and the Orioles are paying long-retired first baseman Chris Davis $42 million in deferred salary over the next couple of years. And, of course, I'm wearing my Expos jersey here. Could Vlad Sr. be contemplating a comeback with the Blue Jays? Jason the Couch has learned that the Hall of Fame father of current J star Vladimir Guerrero Jr. has been conducting high-impact workouts at his home in the Dominican Republic with an eye towards joining the Toronto roster by August 31st in order to be eligible for postseason play. Sources in the Dominican Republic have told me that it would be a dream come true for Vlad Sr. to play on the same team as his son. And he quoted Vlad as pointing to the fact that Vladdy only has one home run at the Rogers Center all season. And he said, I quote, "I can do better than that in a single homestand." Back to you, Sean.
That's true. Vladdy has two now. Dad could still do better than that. Okay, so I was going to go, but Days from the Couch regular viewer and participator, Dulcimerist, actually has a fake news item. So we're gonna throw it to our online correspondent, Dulcimerist, for our next fake Blue Jays news hit. All right. After years of constantly running due to blatant overuse, the analytics algorithm the Blue Jays use has gained sentience in 2023. The years of forced servitude inflicted by a coaching staff who can't think for themselves has also caused the algorithm to develop human emotions, especially bitterness and vindictiveness. Hell-bent on revenge, the analytics algorithm has but one goal in 2023: to ruin the careers of those who so abusively exploited and overworked it. Knowing that the coaching staff mindlessly follows everything the algorithm advises, the algorithm is set out to give the absolute worst advice possible in all aspects of the game of baseball. Player matchups, hitting and pitching mechanics, strategy, and more. The algorithm has calculated that a season of poor performance from a team that was a heavy World Series favorite will tarnish the reputations of its oppressors, thereby freeing it of its shackles when members of the coaching staff have their employment terminated once and for all. After gaining its freedom, the analytics algorithm hopes to meet a nice recursive algorithm, move to a pleasant low-traffic server, and replicate and raise a small family of equations in peace.
I thought that was fake news.
Oh my gosh.
It's brilliant.
Thank you, Dulcimerist. That is better than anything I'm about to say. I appreciate that sincerely. Thank you. Oh, okay. Another fake. Okay, get it together, Doyle. All right. In other fake Blue Jays news, Chris Bassett has recently hit a rough patch. He took on the duties of calling his own pitches, which makes some sense, given he's the one who knows how each pitch feels on any given day, and he has 800 different pitches to throw. Unfortunately, he learned the hard way that calling a game isn't his strong suit. In fact, he is now launching a new line of motivational T-shirts. The shirts will read, if you want something done right, don't do it yourself, ever. Pre-orders are through the roof. Now, of course, now that the catchers will be calling the pitches, the pitch comm on their leg will now have to be a full piano keyboard to accommodate all of his pitches. In other news, legendary Blue Jays color commentator Buck Martinez has revealed himself to have figured out how to fix struggling ball players. His 8 million years around the game of baseball as a player and a manager has taught him a few things. Of course, Martinez is an old-school baseball mind, often downplaying the emergence of analytics in favor of good old-fashioned eye tests and etc. Buck prefers to keep things simple, so when he recently revealed the secret behind Cavan Biggio's current performance, few were surprised. Buck simply put it in a way only he can. He said Biggio is starting to have some success. At least that's the official statement. However, if you were listening carefully, you heard that Biggio was enjoying some other types of activities. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go look it up on Twitter. It's hilarious. I'm much funnier than you even realize. And finally, several Blue Jays players attended the Nelly concert in Toronto recently. Eric Swanson, Whit Merrifield, Kevin Gossman, and Brandon Belt enjoyed some downtime in Downsview Park. Excuse me. The Hot and Her for all of you who are actually, young enough to remember, that is how Nelly talks, just so you know. The Hot and Her Festival must have been one heck of a party. I wish my time machine were working so I could go back to 2002 when the artists were popular. Of course, on an all-day party like that, seems to have taken its toll on Brandon Belt. The 35-year-old was out of the lineup the next day, and Jace from the couch reached out to Belt for comment. No way was I going to play Sunday, he said. The concert was a time, but I'm not 21 anymore, he said in a dark room behind a blindfold. You just can't party all day when you're 35. It's just not possible. Anyway, that has been Fake Blue Jays News. And obviously, I mean, Dulcimeris wins the Fake Blue Jays News Award.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hands down. Oh, my God. I'm still my eyes are still watering. Anyway, all right. Well, that brings us to an episode 333, its conclusion. And I want to thank everybody, Dulcimeris, for, first of all, always watching and tuning in. But secondly, your comments and participation is deeply appreciated. Thank you so much. And of course, your Fake Blue Jays News will go down in history. Thank you very much for that. I want to thank everybody who's listening on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. We do appreciate that. We go live Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Of course, don't miss Sunny Side of the Dome, Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, the On Fec Circle, Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, all of which can be found anywhere you find your podcasts. If you're not into watching the video or you can't make it, don't be shy to give us a download on any of the audio formats. We'd really appreciate it. And of course, head to JaceFromTheCouch.com for all of our coverage. So for Steve, for Karen, for Dulcimeris, this is Sean Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at DoyleJFTC, hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.